Come on, kill me!
Not right now.
This horsey was sacrificed brilliantly by black with the purpose of removing all of the kingside pawns who are protecting the white king so that black's all-in kingside attack breaks through faster with the intent of delivering checkmate when he brings more of his pieces into his dazzling attack. In this position many threats loom over white's king and even greater threats are created later on in the game.
Now I kill you.
One of those spectacular threats is in this position when black could have forced a checkmate in 3 if white misplayed a move, however his opponent managed to save his king brilliantly by giving up his queen, forking black's king and eliminating the rook on the g-file, which is the key to black's attack. However, as the game dragged on, more and more brilliant threats were created, and even though white gave up his massive material advantage, he was unable to save his king, so he resigned in the end before his opponent could deliver the checkmate. This spectacular game was played by Vasily Ivanchuk and Artur Yusupov back in 1991, and Yusupov emerged victorious even though Ivanchuk had the advantage early on due to a little misplay he did, and Yusupov brilliantly turned the game in his favor. White opened the game uniquely by playing the English opening with pawn to c4. Black responded with e5, which in this position is known as the King's English variation. Right off the bat we see that black's pawn structure already looks unusual this early in the game. Normally in chess is best to avoid these kinds of pawn structures because they can create soft squares later on in the game if the player is careless. But in this game those moves are flexible and transpositional because they create many attacking opportunities after the opening phase of the game. Both sides are developing their pieces normally and castled their majesties to safety early on in the game so they can start prepping their attacks without having to worry about their kings being left in an open position. In this position both sides have various options at their disposal. For example, white can decide to push his pawn to e4, or capture on e5 and then put his pawn on e4 to create a good central foothold. Black has similar choices as well. However, white played bishop to a3, pinning black's d6 pawn and preparing to capture on e5 with his pawn to initiate an attack. Black advanced his pawn forward and attacks white's horsey.
Run.
After white attempted to capture black's pawn with his knight, black pushed his pawn even further into white's territory. The placement of this pawn is brilliant because black already created weaknesses in white's kingside pawn structure and turned his pawn into a super pawn that will be a devastating obstacle for white later on. White pushed his pawn to f4 instead of capturing on e3, which was the right call. If white made the mistake of capturing the pawn, then black could simply take the pawn with his queen, checking the king and creating a fork, winning the knight in the process. One thing to note is that if white placed his pawn on f3 instead of f4 it would have been better because then the white squares would be under control and black won't be able to penetrate into white's territory without sacrificing some pieces. As expected, black placed his horsey on g4. This is a wonderful position for the knight because it adds additional protection for the pawn and creates many attacking ideas on the king side that black can use to his advantage. At the moment white can't really deal with this pesky knight and is forced to leave it there. If white were to try and kick the knight away with his pawn, then we simply have horsey on f2, attacking white's rook and pawn simultaneously. After white protects his rook by moving it to face the horsey, then black just takes on h3 with check, and after the bishop captures, black will recapture and create another attack on the rook. After white pulls back his rook, black will then get his queen involved in the action and his kingside attack will soon prevail. Both players have played pawn breaks in their respective wings where they have the advantage, which developed attacking opportunities for both of them. White is in a better position than black because his queenside attack is likely to break through much quicker than black's due to the way his pieces are positioned. However, unlike white, black's attack aims at checkmate, and if successful the game will end instantly. If white ignores the defense of his king side, he will ultimately lose the game. White brings his horsey to assist in the attack, using the pin that the bishop created earlier to his advantage. Black ignores his hanging pawn and continues to advance with his attack, aiming to break down white's defenses. After white took the d6 pawn with his bishop, he included an additional piece in the defense against black's incoming mating threats. Our first mating threat is queen to h5, threatening to take the h2 pawn and end the game. Black brilliantly sacrificed his horsey to break through white's defense and created numerous threats that loom over the white king.
Ready to die.
I was born ready, mother.
Now white is faced with a critical decision. He needs to pick the right knight to check black's king. This check creates a fork that will win the bishop on f5 and attack the queen at the same time. In the game, however, white picked the wrong horsey, so let's go over with what could have happened if he picked the right one first. If white picked this horsey in the game, then his other knight would still be defending his king side in this position. However, there is a devastating attack black could have created with bishop to e5 that will create a spectacular and nearly unavoidable checkmate threat. Now we will witness what it could have looked like. If this brilliant move was played in the game, it would have created massive threats for white. The point behind this move is to open the g file and bring a rook to the attack and create a dazzling checkmate threat. Before we get into it, however, it's important to note that the correct piece to capture the black bishop is the pawn, so we will capture with the pawn here. This would have been a critical position in the game. There are only two moves that can defend against this threat, but first let's see what would have happened if white played any random move. First we start with a brilliant queen sacrifice and force white to capture with his bishop, which opens the g file. Then we move our horsey to h2 and check the king. And finally we include our rookie boy to deliver the spectacular checkmate, completely crushing white's king with the help of black's e3 pawn. The moves white has to play in this position are horsey to e3, then after black recaptures with his e3 pawn, white moves his pawn to e6. This is the only way to stop black's checkmate attack, because now he attacks the black queen and his horsey defends the bishop. If black went for the checkmate in this position, then white could pick up the knight with his dark square bishop and all of black's advances would be halted. However, in the game white forked the king with the wrong horsey. We see that the same dazzling checkmate threat we explored earlier is manifesting itself in the actual game as well. After black's brilliant rook lift, he is preparing to place the rook on g6 and unleash this deadly mechanism on white. Although white has no efficient way to defend against this attack, he still manages to buy himself enough time to fend off the inevitable checkmate. However, let's showcase this brilliant mechanism one last time with white playing two random moves. Simply beautiful. Pay close attention to the way white brilliantly saved his king from this deadly attack. With a calculated queen sacrifice, white forced black to capture with his king, setting him up to be forked by the horsey, which allowed white to get the dangerous rook off the board, sacrificing the horsey in the process and destroying this brilliant mechanism black was going to use to close off the game. With both rooks gone, black can't use this checkmate attack to beat white. However, with the way his pieces are positioned while being majorly down in material, he still has a brilliant game-changing move that creates an unavoidable mate threat, and unlike last time, this one is unavoidable. This move is horsey to f2. The threat here is that black will move his knight to h3 in his next move, and then nothing can save the white king from the inevitable mate. If in the game the horsey was placed on h3 and white captured it with his bishop, we can place our queen on either the h1 or f2 square and it's checkmate on the spot thanks to black's super pawn on e3. If white ignores the horsey and plays any other move, we simply have queen to g1 checkmate. All of this is possible thanks to this brilliant pawn's position being a devastating obstacle for white. In this position, it's impossible for white to escape his inevitable loss. Even though he tried his best and sacrificed two of his remaining pieces to temporarily hold off black's attack and even managed to get rid of the horsey on h3, black was still able to secure his victory in the game by bringing his queen back to g3. In this position, all of the squares the king can run off to are covered by black's pawn and queen, and white resigned because he is one move away from checkmate. There is nothing that can defend from the brilliant checkmate with queen to f2 in black's next move. Yusupov brilliantly demonstrated how to create a devastating kingside attack and won the game.